And we are back here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. I am live in the belly of the beast. Derek Laughlin is back in the studio, but I had to make my way down to Ohio to catch up with several of the top prospects in this state because, as the coach of Springfield High, my man Mo Douglas said, used to work the Michigan camp back in the day, sent many players to Michigan over the years, right? And now has the number one player in the state of Ohio in Aaron Scott. That's his guy. And he said to me the other day, he said the boys are back in town. And who was he talking about? He was talking about Michigan. Michigan being back in Ohio is what he was talking about. So that being the case, I am in Ohio strong, checking out guys as I go back on the road, coming off the road after a long, arduous but eventful trek is my guy Alejandro Zuniga, the guy who Jim Harbaugh coined the go-getter, the guy who flagged, who Jim Harbaugh flagged down and said, "Can you take me to my car?" when Alejandro found him at the airport last year. Alejandro, how you doing, man?
Hey, you're making it seem like I just hiked the Oregon Trail or something like that. It was long, sure, but arduous is maybe a step too far. I was traveling on the team bus.
Oh,
I was
wow!
sitting back on leather seats with unlimited snacks and onboard entertainment. So yeah, I'm good.
It's, you're truly an embedded journalist, man. That is a really really cool experience. I was telling the people that one of the things that is hard to do is to convey who the players are off the field, right? You can tell them this is what a guy is like, but they're always so buttoned up in a press conference, and you understand that. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but you don't get a chance to see them, who they are, what makes them tick, what they really think. That's hard to do. We've been able to do that more with behind the uniform, right? Well, when you're embedded with the team, you definitely get a chance to see that side, right? I imagine that you got a lot of stories like that.
Yeah, it was a very fun experience all around, and I mean it's something that's going to provide value from our perspective, right, over at the Michigan Insider for our coverage throughout the year. Is that we just spent a week with players in situations that aren't talking to them right before a game, right after a game, or in a press conference with 25 other reporters sitting there. I got to go with them as they were experiencing, and I was experiencing a lot of very cool things for the first time. I mean, going to the US Capitol building, going to Arlington National Cemetery, watching the changing of the guard and having a few Michigan football players participate in a wreath laying ceremony, going to Gettysburg, and fun things too. You talk about getting to know the players. Spending an evening with them at a Washington Nationals game was an absolute blast. I mean, you put 100 plus college students at a baseball game, many of them maybe for the first time, but then give them unlimited food and put them up on the jumbotron so everyone in the stadium knows where they are and who they are and that they're there. And also, by the way, the Nationals are not very good this year, and they were losing by quite a bit. So all of a sudden, the Michigan football team is the hottest attraction in this stadium. It was a lot of fun, and absolutely, you get to know these players as people, which of course we always try to do, and we always try to convey. But it is much easier to do that when you are spending, you know, 5 straight days with them, pretty much nonstop.
Yeah, man. I had a similar experience last year when I went to a Cubs game, but with some of the guys, but it was only like 30 guys, not the whole team and not the coaching staff too. And you could and they had like a section. They had like a private section, so it wasn't like the fans had access to them. They went out on the field and they threw out the first pitch and all that kind of stuff. But they were sequestered. You guys were in the people, and it was all the players and all the and Jim Harbaugh. So I imagine that was an experience. But for people who aren't aware of they don't know the details of the trip, kind of take them through from start to finish where the trip went, and then kind of give us your take on some of the stops, because I think you started in New York, right? Yeah, you started in New York, so we can start with your experience there in New York, but kind of lay out the journey, if you will.
For sure. So this is something that the Michigan football program has done many years now. It took a pause during the pandemic, but has since returned. Is that Jim Harbaugh has long coined or long argued that not all learning is done in the classroom. So as a result, he likes taking Michigan football team on trips. Before the pandemic, it was international trips. Last couple of years, it's been within the United States, and it might go international again in the future. But this year's trip, it was a week. It just wrapped up yesterday. They went to New York City for a couple nights. They did all the basic things you would expect to do in New York City: Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, 9/11 Memorial. Also did some very interesting things that you only do if you're the Michigan football team. Like they were on the floor at the New York Stock Exchange. A few players got out to go see Hamilton. I guess lots of people go see Hamilton, but yeah, I think they got comp tickets to go see Hamilton. They had donor events in New York City. Then they proceeded on a private train down to DC, where they spent quite a few days. They went to museums, as I mentioned, Arlington National Cemetery. They got private tours of the Library of Congress, the Supreme Court, um, U.S. Capitol. Went by the White House. Went to the Nationals game, and then got some free time too to go to museums, including the International Spy Museum, the Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a very beautiful museum. I'd never been there before myself. One of my favorite stops on the trip. And then wrapped it up over the last couple days with a stop in Gettysburg, going to the battlefields, getting both a speaker at lunch before going out and experiencing it, and then getting guided tours through Gettysburg, and then finished it up yesterday in Cleveland, right in near you, I guess, in Ohio, Sam, where they went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then to Canton to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and they have now since returned to Ann Arbor. So New York City, DC, Gettysburg, Cleveland, Canton, all that in 7 days, a whirlwind, but really hitting the big name stops in every single city.
So to highlight, we have Alejandro Zuniga from the Michigan Insider, michiganinsider.com. Be sure to check out his coverage over there. Already had a lot of great content, stories. He is a burgeoning photographer. How about that? His shots are up there. I'm proud of the photographer he's becoming, as well as he's doing this thing, taking photos. But let's just New York. Your experience in New York covering them. What kind of jumps out at you? And did you have a slice while you were there?
New York, impressions of New York, rainy, very rainy. Um, New York, it was a very interesting experience for me, and I think for the Michigan football team as well. Uh, Listen, I covered this similar trip last summer, right when they were in Mackinac, they were in Traverse City, they went to the sand dunes, they were in Idlewild. When the Michigan football team shows up in northern Michigan, everyone knows who they are and everyone is following them. When the Michigan football team shows up in New York City, nobody gives a damn. And nowhere was that kind of accentuated more as to when I walked to the staff member at the 9/11 memorial, because that's where they were starting one of their days, and I asked, "Hey, is the Michigan football team here yet?" And she said, "Who?" And I said, the Michigan football team. And she said, let me go check my logs, which I thought bad sign, because if you miss 150 people all wearing the same thing, then you are probably not very good at your job. But, give her the benefit of the doubt. She goes back into her office. She checks her visitor logs, comes out and tells me, I'm sorry, sir. There have been no local high school teams show up here today. I said, thank you very much. To be fair, she was correct. They had not yet shown up. But New York City, it's the city, it's the city that never sleeps. It is the city that never stops, and I think that was eye opening for a lot of people. A guy that I just like keeping my eye on is Colston Loveland. Right, he's a kid from Gooding, Idaho. When he comes to Ann Arbor, Ann Arbor is already a big city for him. So it's just fun to see him then transplanted into New York City, and to see all these folks transplanted into New York City. Um, you know, it's a bustling city. The rain stopped them from being able to do just about everything they wanted to do. But like I said, they were able to go to Statue of Liberty, New York Stock Exchange, Empire State Building. Chris Jenkins, defensive tackle, did not go up the Empire State Building. Told me he's afraid of heights, so he went to go see Hamilton instead. And then they got a bus tour, which, for me was not the most exciting thing in the world because it meant that we were just sitting in New York City traffic for a couple hours. But
Mm.
that's what you do when it's raining. We got to see Grand Central Terminal, where there was like an anime convention going on, which a lot of football players found very interesting. And then wrap things up by heading over to their private Amtrak and a brand new, I believe it's called Mohegan Hall, a spectacular piece of architecture, if I do say so myself, and getting a chance to, they got private food catered onto that train. But New York City, did I get a slice? I did not get a slice,
You
Sam.
did
I was
not get a
not kidding
slice.
when you asked me that. I did get a half dozen bagels, which I have been consuming and
Man,
enjoying,
see, I lay out assignments. When you went to Chicago, I said, go to Giordano's, get you some deep dish, man.
and I did.
We got to compare these things. We got to, and I wanted to know, what did you like better? You like the New York slice or Chicago deep dish? So now we got to find another reason to get you back in New York.
That is
Yeah.
fair, but Sam, there is no argument if I cannot pick it up, which you cannot do with Chicago deep dish pizza. It is not a pizza; it is a soup.
We won't let the Chicago people hear you say that because they take that stuff serious. I went and I got one of those Chicago dogs one time and put ketchup on it. I thought they were gonna chase me out of town, man.
Glad you're still with us.
Yeah, it's like, don't do that. Don't put ketchup on a hot dog or a Chicago dog. There will be problems. Talking to Alejandro Zuniga here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. There are so many opportunities I know you had to talk to the guys at the different stops, New York, Chicago, even up to Bay City yesterday, which was off the tour, which we'll get to shortly, but a chance to really go one on one with guys. You went one on one with JJ McCarthy. You just put up a piece over on the Michigan Insider.com. Folks, be sure to check it out. What were your takeaways as you look back and kind of think about your impressions, your takeaways from your conversation with JJ? What would they be?
I think the thing that strikes me about JJ, and this is something that I noticed last year too, is when you're JJ McCarthy, you're the 5-star quarterback. That was last year. Now this year, you're the guy who has just led a team to a Big Ten championship, and you're a face. You're one of the faces of the program. If you're QB1, you're always a face of a program. And when you're JJ McCarthy and you've done what you've done at Michigan and in high school, then doubly so. Um, so when you are JJ McCarthy, you sort of like Jim Harbaugh, you just don't have a moment to yourself when you're out in public, right?
Hmm.
And to someone like me, I'm not going to say I'm an introvert, but I need some time that's quiet in a day. And watching JJ McCarthy throughout this trip was exhausting to me. Right? Is not only is he doing everything that the football team is doing, but it's every single time the team is out in public and someone recognizes them, the questions and people came up to me to ask because I was wearing my credential and people thought I was, an official on the Michigan football team. They'd come up to me and ask, "Hey, where's JJ?" Okay, oh, just give him a moment, man. Let him breathe. So really the thing that I took away from JJ McCarthy is, I see him out when he's out in public. We've talked to him in press conferences many times, and you've covered him from when he was in high school.
Hmm.
Is that when he is out in public, maybe he is putting on a bit of a persona because everyone does when they're out in public. But it's just really impressive to me the way he handles all of the attention that's put on him, and the way that he reflects that in positive energy. Maybe I've been looking at his Instagram stories too much, that he's always posting things about meditation and positive mindsets and how that impacts your life. But it really was impressive. Is that you know he is probably one of the friendliest players on the team, and that's not only with people outside the team, but people within the team. Most of the time throughout the trip, the team buses were broken up by position group. So the tight ends and specialists were all in one bus. The DBs, the secondary, were all in a different bus, and so on and so on. And those position groups are often friends with each other. JJ McCarthy was one of the few guys who I saw who was talking to everyone. He
Mhm.
wasn't just sticking in his group. I'd see him talking. He'd be with a coach and walking through a museum with a coach, and then I'd see him later. He'd be with one of the analysts, the quote unquote coaches, and then he'd be with the tight ends, and then he'd be with the quarterback. He was with everyone. And you talk about someone who you want leading your football program. We were sitting down with Jim Harbaugh yesterday, and he's saying, when he's talking to freshmen and there are incoming freshmen on the Michigan football team, he's pointing at JJ McCarthy and saying, you want to be great, go be more like that guy.
Mhm.
And last year, when JJ McCarthy won the starting job, uh, Jim Harbaugh says of JJ, we would follow him to anywhere. We would follow JJ anywhere he takes us, and I encourage everyone on this team to do the same, right? And you see that obviously because he's a great football player, um, but that is accentuated by what he does off the football field, and that's what I saw this week in New York and DC, Gettysburg, and yesterday in Bay City. And like I said, I've got a piece up on the MichiganInsider.com. Yesterday, he was asked to sign somebody's face, and he did so in permanent marker. But hey, that's what they
Wow.
wanted. So I'm really proud to be JJ McCarthy.
Right. All right. So let's kind of compare and contrast that with the experience that you witnessed the early enrollees having. I mean, typically, you know, those guys aren't available to the media at large. But when you're a solo embedded member of the media, as you were on this trip, you do get a chance to be around those guys to see how they're taking it all in, to see how they're adjusting. So, what about the early enrollees?
Yeah, man, that was one of the best parts of the trip, right? Because whether it used to be, I think, an official policy, maybe it's not anymore. But Michigan football doesn't typically throw its freshmen out for press conferences, and there are exceptions. Last year, Will Johnson is becoming one of the better players in the Big Ten, and he's faced media his whole life, so they're okay having him talk to people. But for the most part, these are guys that they're big names when they commit and enroll, but then you don't talk to them again for a couple of years. And it was a lot of fun getting to know them. Over at the Michigan Insider, I do a little bit of recruiting, but I don't do it a ton. So for me and a lot of these players, it was the first time to meet them and talk to them and interact with them for the first time, and to see them in context of their team. A couple names that stood out to me, or a couple of interactions that I had. I really enjoyed watching Zach Marshall on the trip. Zach, he's a early enrollee. He's a tight end coming from California, and he is just he's a very outgoing personality and fits in very well in the tight end room. Um, he was teaching me a game that everyone on the team was doing. It's called shadow boxing. Which, if you do not know, I did not know.
I gotta see you shadow box.
I I didn't try it. He was teaching Jim Harbaugh too, and Jim Harbaugh did that for while we were waiting in line at the Supreme Court. I want to say it was, but that was a lot of the time on the bus. Was watching players pretend to hit each other. I think it is. But Zach Marshall, obviously, he's getting along real well with the team, and it's interesting to talk to these freshmen because when they show up and when they're being recruited, and you see their 4 stars or 5 stars or whatever it is, these players are the peak. They're the big fish at their high school a lot of times, and then they're showing up on the Michigan football team. And what Zach Marshall was telling me is like, hey, look at this tight end room. Look at AJ Barner, look at Colston Loveland, look at Matthew Hibner, look at all these guys who have been here. The Michigan tight end room is like 12 people, right? And a lot of these guys have been with the program for 2, 3, 4 years. So he recognizes, this isn't going to be his year. This is not going to be most likely. Colston was a great exception, and good for him. Most likely, we're not going to get to the end of the season and everyone's going to have Zach Marshall as a household name.
Right.
Um, and to hear him, express that and recognize it, and know that, hey, it's, you got to put in the work, just like Matthew Hibner did, just like all these guys did. And recognizing that that's what his process is going to look like. It's humbling, and it's great to hear that from him, and to get his perspective as he begins that journey. Jair Hill, another guy I love talking to. He and Fred Moore and Samaj were very tight. So it's cool to see the early enrollees hanging out together, and then within their position groups.
So
Um,
question for you real
yeah,
quick. So did you when you talked to Jair, did you was it an interview or were you just talking to him?
it was an interview. It was an
Okay.
interview, and
See, that's impressive.
that was, it's when you're at a baseball game, and baseball games, despite the new pace of play rules, they do stretch a little bit. They are not always the most action packed things on the planet. And when you got 120 people at a baseball game and they've done the wave already, and gotten on the jumbotron and the game's still going on, yeah, why not talk to Alejandro, see what he has to ask you.
Yeah, man. And look, but you know what? You want him. That's it's a progression and comfort level.
Yeah.
Like you could talk to him and it's like his personality really comes out because he's a really he's a joking, have fun kind of dude. You put a microphone in front of him and it's kind of like he gets real buttoned up. So if he wasn't like that, I think part of it was maybe the circumstance, it being at the game. I think another part of it is he's maturing more in that position, getting more comfortable with being on the mic and getting more comfortable with Alejandro Zuniga. How about that?
Yeah, it was that's one of the benefits of spending 5 days with them, right? Is they recognize the face, and they know that you're not there to make them look bad, right? Like, it's a weird balance when you are spending that much time with them. Of, I want to do my job, and part of that job is observing, and doing interviews and taking it all in, and all that. At the same time, like, I don't want them to feel like I'm watching everything they're doing, and
Mhm.
I want them to be themselves. So, talking to Jair, who is from Kankakee, Illinois. My dad actually lives right down the road from there. So, open the conversation with that. It's like, hey, my dad, he lives in Memphis, which is a town no one's ever heard of, but Jair has. So his face lit up. He's like, man, I know that place. I know that place very well. And so that we had a good conversation.
So that must be a pretty rural setting if it's close to Kankakee.
It
Kankakee is out there.
it very much is. He works in environmental conservation. So yes, and he, I the first time I went down there, I was introduced to the herd of buffalo that he worked with, and that is not a joke.
Right.
He
I know.
he actually has a herd of buffalo that he was taking care of. So yeah, very rural place. That was obviously a great conversation starter with Jair. And yeah, those small things of building the relationships, right?
Yeah.
This job, as you know very well, Sam, is, there's only so far that being a good writer, being a good photographer, being a good interviewer can get you, right? It's all about relationships, and
100%.
those are built, as you're getting to know someone over months and years. When they're high school prospects, they're built over, you being on this beat for a very long time, as long as I can remember. And in smaller doses, they're built by spending time with the team when they're not thinking about football 100% of the time. So that's where that's valuable.
Very well said, Alejandro. I mean, look, you covered too much. You have too many stories in the hopper to hit them all, right? I mean, just folks, you want to keep it locked over on the MichiganInsider.com because he'll be unpacking this stuff for weeks. But definitely want to have you hit on Jim Harbaugh
Yeah.
because you observed Jim Harbaugh over the whole trip. You were with him yesterday as they made it back up to the event in Bay City. You had a chance to interact with him. Just your thoughts on Jim as he returns for another run, as he returns after legitimately rebuffing the NFL and saying, "Hey, man, this is where I want to be. This is the happiest I've been." What did you see and what did you hear as you observed and as you talked to him over the course of this trip?
Well, Jim Harbaugh is a very popular man. That is number one. He, much like JJ McCarthy, Jim Harbaugh does not get many moments to himself. It is unhelpful that he is taller, bigger, and louder than JJ McCarthy, so he's a lot more visible as well. But I think this is something you said last year, Sam. We were at the beginning of fall camp, um, doing just a regular press conference with Jim Harbaugh. He had just revealed his entire two deep, which is something that he never does. And you turned to me, Sam, and you said, "I think Jim Harbaugh is very, very comfortable with this football team. I think he's very excited with this football team, and I think he's very confident that this is going to be a very good football team. Jim Harbaugh is not usually like this." And I got that same feeling throughout this trip, right? This is I was sitting down with Jim Harbaugh yesterday, up in Bay City. He had just done this presentation. He had given the keynote address, as you mentioned earlier, Sam, on the show, with Skills USA, partnered with Wolverine Boots, with high school students who are pursuing their careers and continuing their careers by learning trades. So he gives a keynote address. Afterward, he's back in the speakers lounge, where he gets a few moments to sit back and relax, and he's talking to me and a couple other reporters, and he just starts talking about the state of the Michigan football program, and it's something he has said before, but he just said it again. It's good, it's real good. There are a lot of players on this football team that are going to get drafted next year, and he knows that. And he knows that, this year, 23 to lead into 24, it's going to be quite a bit of turnover on the football team because he has a lot of NFL talent on the team. Um, but it's so he knows he has the talent to win. Does that's half the battle? He said. Are they going to win more games? Maybe not, because that's what they play the football games for. But he's very confident in the talent of the football team, and I think he's very comfortable in where he is right now as a Michigan football coach. The one thing that he said about earlier this offseason about choosing to rebuff the NFL, as you said, Sam, and return to Michigan football, is that he takes stock in not only how he feels about the job, but how the administration feels about him and how the Michigan fan base feels about him. And you want to talk about a fan base that is given the love and making sure that he feels the love. It was watching Jim Harbaugh throughout this entire trip. Um, Michigan at the Nationals game, nonstop Michigan fans showing up. In fact, even a kid in an Ohio State shirt decided that he wanted to get his photo taken with Jim
Wow.
Harbaugh, and Jim was okay with it. Um, hey,
Wow.
you beat him 2 years in a row. You get to do that, and you get to smile as you do it. But this is a coach who not only he's confident in his team, I think he's very comfortable in where he's at. And I asked him about that. And I asked him, hey, Jim, is it wrong? Is it wrong to say that, you're kind of, it seems like you're having the time of your life right now, right? You beat Ohio State 2 years in a row. You've come back from taking a pay cut to maybe being close to being let go at Michigan, to all of a sudden you've brought this program to a place that it hasn't been in quite some time. And not only are you doing that, but hey, here you are with your football team having a blast at a Nationals game. You're going out and watching the flyover. You're going to Arlington. You're doing these things that clearly Jim Harbaugh, the human being, really enjoys doing. The kind of nerdy dad stuff that I'm sure all dads kind of enjoy doing. Yeah, it seems like you're having the time of your life, and he's like, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like he's having a really good time as the Michigan football coach, and I think he's very happy where he's at.
Yeah, he one of the other things that struck me last year was how much he talked about culture, the culture of this program, the culture of this team is how good it is. And I don't think it was saying that it was bad in the past. I think it was just talking about how elite, how exceptional the culture was. And I look at that in retrospect and look at the season that they had, and then look at the guys that decided to come back, right? Look at the guys who decided to come back for last year's team and look at the guys who decided to come back for this year's team. That says a ton about not just about they have a chance to win, but it says a ton about the culture, at least to me.
Yeah, and you see that when you're interacting with them, right? I'll be honest, by the end of the trip, maybe you can hear it in my voice. I was pretty tired, right?
It's
You know,
right. Yeah, it's work.
it is work. And hey, even for the Michigan football team, they're football players, and yeah, they're student athletes, but I can't imagine all of them are history majors. So by the end of the trip, after you've been to a half dozen museums and a bunch of monuments, and you've seen a lot of well-known faces but dead faces, and heard a lot of lessons. Yeah, I'm sure it gets tiring, right? um I was talking to Fred more about that, and I asked him, "Man, like, aren't you tired? Like, we're literally on a night tour. You could be asleep right now. I should be asleep right now. Like, aren't you tired?" And he put it very much into context for me. He's like, "Hey, like, this is very cool. There's a lot of stuff to do. I'm not tired, and I think knowledge is power."
Mm.
And hey, well, what a humbling moment for me to be like, "Yo, quit complaining. You are on a trip around the country with the Michigan football team. Uh, do not complain."
Yeah.
But that's all part of the culture, right? And I would believe, Jim Harbaugh regularly speaks very positively about his team. He's going to do that throughout the fall. You're going to hear him say very good things about his Michigan football team, and that's coach speak in one sense. But then when you also hear him do it in more informal settings, then you believe him more, right?
Mm.
So yesterday, when I was sitting with him, he said, "Hey, he again he complimented the culture, but he's like, hey, we just were on a trip in New York City and DC, and every single player made their curfew every single night.
Mhm.
We were in the biggest city in the United States, and we did not lose a single player, which says a lot about the football team itself. The fact that maybe they hold each other accountable says a lot about the support staff, who it seemed like they were herding cats through the streets of New York sometimes. But it's those little things, they
Yeah, shout
they
out, give Dave Abloff a shout out. You know
yeah,
Dave Ab
Dave Abloff, absolutely deserves a shout out. He is he's the associate athletic director for communications, I believe is his official title. We know him as the head PR guy over on the Michigan football team. But in fact, he ran into a friend of mine because he was in New York City a couple months ago, helping plan for this trip. That's how long it takes. It takes a couple months,
Mhm.
and he was at the airport doing a pre-trip scouting. Uh, he's reading the scouting report of New York City, but it took a lot of effort to put this together, and to take 120 plus people to New York City, and not just people, but like these are adults, these are young adults to New York City and to DC, and to get them there and back without any significant problems, any real big headaches. It shows you that this is a group of responsible men, and who are enjoying the trip and not always enjoying every single moment of it, because like I said, it was long and there was a lot going on. But a lot of them, and I'd say most of them, if not all of them, took something really meaningful from it, at least some of the stops.
Yeah, well, folks, look, we just gave you a half hour synopsis. There is so much to unpack from this trip. You gotta let Alejandro get some sleep first, right? He did throw up the piece with JJ yesterday because you were up in Bay City for that event up there. It was a signing day for kids who were going to trade school, right? It's a really really cool, really neat event with Wolverine boots, and NIL opportunity for some of the guys. I mean, it all came together, and Jim being a keynote speaker. So, lots of content to unpack. You can see some of it that's already been put up. There have been photo galleries and stories, and the interview with JJ that's up right now over on the MichiganInsider.com. So, if you aren't on it, it's time to get there because there's a lot of cool intel, information, and stories already posted, and a lot more to come. So, Alejandro, great job, man. Terrific, terrific coverage so far. I know you got to get some sleep. I woke you up early, so I appreciate you, taking time out of your beauty sleep, or your recovery to spend with us this morning here on the show.
I appreciate you having me on, Sam, and yeah, thank you to the readers, the listeners, to you for supporting the Michigan Insider and allowing us to be out on the trip. The most important part, the most important, the tenet of my coverage as a journalist is number one, you got to be there, and that's what you're doing right now in Ohio. That's what I was doing out on the East Coast. Got to be there because that's how stories happen. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. All right, folks, as we get to a break, want to remind you, so these interactions that Alejandro just had, right? The interaction that we open the door for you with Behind the Uniform. We have a Behind the Uniform episode up right now with Rod Moore that is outstanding. It's an Ohio guy with a chip on his shoulder about Ohio State that comes screaming through. So you want to check that out. But you can have your own experience with Michigan football players at Wolverine Weekend, June 9th through the 11th, up at Grand Traverse Resort and Spa. It's gonna the first part of it doesn't involve the players. The woods and whiskey tasting, there are no players at that. No players at the whiskey tasting, right? They don't. That's Friday. That's the night. On the 10th is when the players get there for the dinner program. And so you're gonna have Colston Loveland, who you heard Alejandro talk about. He'll be there. You're going to have Donovan Edwards. He's going to be there. Will Johnson's going to be there. And Junior Colson. So there'll be the meet and greet with those guys, photo opportunities. You'll be able to rub shoulders with those key players on the Michigan football team. But that's just a part of it. When dinner starts and the program begins, Devin Gardner and I will take the stage. And you see us do Monday Morning Quarterback, where we're going to do Monday Morning Quarterback in front of a live audience, but with the players. So when we're breaking down that big wheel route for a touchdown for Colston Loveland, and we're drawing it up and we're breaking down the play, we're going to be able to talk to Colston about what he saw on that play and what happened and what was Ohio State doing and what was the call and how did you adjust all of that in front of an audience. And then if you want to ask a question, you'll be able to ask questions of those guys as well. Then you transition into the final day of Wolverine Weekend, which is the golf outing on Sunday again. Opportunity to rub shoulders with the players, take photos and whatnot. We're going to have a live broadcast that morning as well. And then, we're going to be driving across the course. I know Devin and I are going to have a cart as well. We're going to be going across the course talking to all the Wolverine fans that are playing golf on the Wolverine at Grand Traverse Resort and Spa. This is an outstanding event. If you haven't signed up, go do it now. GrandTraverseResort.com. Again, GrandTraverseResort.com, whether it's all 3 days or just golf or just dinner, whatever combination of days that you want to have in your opportunity, go get signed up now. You will not regret it. It will wet your whistle for the season, and it'll give you a different vantage point, a different view of the players because you'll see them away from the field, which gives you a totally different perspective, as you just heard from Alejandro. Again, GrandTraverseResort.com.